A week-long moratorium on strikes against Ukraine may turn out to be not a help, but an advantage for Russia. Analysts from ISW warn the temporary moratorium on Russian strikes against Ukraine's energy facilities announced by President Trump could bring the Kremlin much more benefit than it does Kyiv. This specifically concerns the agreements that emerged after a phone conversation between Trump and Putin. Amid severe winter frosts, when Ukraine's energy sector was under maximum possible strain. And now, more information in our report. My name is Yevhen Sirov. This is the Glavred channel. Subscribe and give us a like. Let's get started. Information began to spread in the public space about a temporary halt to attacks on Ukraine's energy sector, which supposedly concerns only power plants, substations, and other critical facilities, but does not mean a general ceasefire. According to media reports, Trump personally appealed to Putin to temporarily halt the strikes, and the Kremlin publicly declared its readiness for such a pause. President Zelensky confirmed that such agreements were discussed, but emphasized that their content and control mechanisms remain extremely unclear. At the same time, ISW emphasizes that this one-week moratorium is not a real concession from Russia and in no way guarantees a de-escalation of the war. On the contrary, a temporary halt to strikes on the energy sector could play into Moscow's hands, as it gives them the opportunity to stockpile missiles, drones, and ammunition, so that after the moratorium ends, they can launch even more massive and destructive attacks. This strategic approach becomes exceptionally and increasingly hazardous if Ukraine also limits its responses, effectively playing by rules that primarily benefit the opposing forces. Military analysts frequently remind us that Russia has repeatedly used short-term pauses in fire as a calculated element of so-called cognitive warfare. Formally, the Kremlin demonstrates a willingness for peace, humanitarian actions, or negotiations, but in reality, such pauses are used to regroup forces, restore logistics, and prepare for new offensive actions. Moscow has previously proposed similar temporary ceasefires, while consistently refusing a long-term and sustainable cessation of hostilities. The context in which this moratorium was announced is especially important. It concerns specifically the energy infrastructure, which is critically important for the country's survival during the winter period, when freezing temperatures pose serious risks to heating, water supply, and the operation of hospitals. There was active discussion in the media about rumors of a possible ban on strikes against energy facilities in Kyiv, the Kyiv region, and other regions of Ukraine until the beginning of February, which was linked to preparations for another round of negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. Critics of the idea of temporary moratoriums emphasize that even if Russia formally agrees not to strike energy infrastructure, this does not mean an end to attacks on other elements of civilian and military infrastructure. Such steps cannot be considered a real move toward peace. On the contrary, there is a high probability that a short pause will be used by the Kremlin to prepare even larger-scale combined strikes in the future. That is why analysts urge that such initiatives be approached with the utmost caution and not to harbor illusions about the Kremlin's true intentions.